Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnson. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, playing, and production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a studio. If that's the kind of thing that would appeal to you, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. Today we are taking a look at the Garbage Ideas FK Comp. Is it FK Comp or F Comp? I should have asked. Those of you paying attention may have noticed an increased focus on outboard gear around here recently. And I think it started largely with my migration from digital amp simulation to proper tube amps. I went from fully in the box amp pedals to tube amps into load boxes, and I'm now increasingly building out my mic locker and trying to make a point to, as often as possible, really just mic all of my sources up. And that has coincided very directly with an increased kind of awareness of how much more I like the sound of analog gear, how much more I like the sound of moving air and transistors and tubes over just circuit boards. And there is still nothing but space in this world for digital music making solutions. It makes everything so much easier. It makes things fun very frequently for a lot of people. But the way my brain is wired, I like being able to turn knobs and flip switches, and I like to stay away, especially in making music, from my keyboard as much as humanly possible. But this world is not for the faint of heart. It is pricey, it is complicated, getting things up and running and troubleshooting things. It is all so much more of a hassle than just staying in the box. And so when it comes to finding the places I want to invest my time, my energy, my resources, and my real estate in this workflow, I want things to accomplish a couple of key tasks for me. One is they need to sound great and they need to sound inspiring. And number two is ideally I want to find things that I can't get from in the box, because I do have stuff in this rack, things like 1176s and 1073 style preamps that I can use 40 different emulations of in my DAW that do theoretically the exact same thing, but I just find more joy in the outboard versions of it. But that's a hard sell unless this is something that you are doing for a living. So when I come across something that does a sound or does a thing that I don't feel that I can get from in the box, I get really excited, which is why today we are talking about the Garbage Ideas FK Comp modules and their shockingly myriad applications. Despite what you may think, these are not just for exploding your drums. Now, I know a lot of you watching are guitar players, and for some of you, this may be above cruising altitude already, and that's okay. But if you are one of those people, I do hope that you will stick around, because a lot of what we covered today, I think, can still be instructive for other applications to your tone chasing and your songwriting endeavors. So let's start by talking very broadly about what the FK Comp is. And at its core, it is a compressor limiter with a very simple control scheme. You have an input, a mix, and an output, and a 3-position switch at the bottom that jumps between comp, drive, and link. Now let's dig in a little bit more on what this thing actually is. At its core, the FK Comp is a FET compressor and limiter with a very hard knee and a fixed threshold. And what that means is you can't turn the sensitivity of the compressor up and down. What you do is you use that input to drive the signal up across that threshold, and you create the amount of compression or saturation that you want using that input gain. And then you tame it with the mix control, and you set your output level of your entire kind of processed signal with that output. It is worth knowing the mix control goes from fully dry to fully wet, and that output is unity gain at full and attenuates down from there, which means if you have your mix completely dry and the output completely maxed out, that is going to be unity gain of your input signal passing to the output of the signal. In this video, we are going to use the FK comps on drum libraries, analog drum overheads, bass, and guitar. Because I know a lot of you are guitar players, we are going to start with our guitar samples. It's worth pointing out about this circuit that it feels like it's very much designed for drummers first. And when you're in that top position, the comp mode, the compression that this thing can apply to your signal is very aggressive. The limiter is very saturating. And for things like percussive instruments like drums, it sounds like $1 million. It blows things up in really cool ways. But for melodic and more legato sources, I find that driving into that compressor to a point where the "you did it" light starts lighting up, you tend to get a lot of hair and a lot of grit out of this thing that isn't always what you're looking for, unless you want a really specific style of what reads to me as console distortion. However, if you drop down into that second position, the drive position, it disables the compressor circuit, giving you access to 30 decibels of just kind of wide open analog FET drive that actually sounds really killer. And you can use this drive circuit to excite kind of any source you want, drums included. For these sound samples, I want to do something that I found to be really inspiring using that kind of drive circuit, which is taking my Benson Monarch and running it into my Universal Audio aux box. And now, I know at the start we said I've been leaning more into miking up cabinets and stuff, but sometimes the aux is just the fastest, easiest way to get good takes into your DAW, even if the cabinet modeling in this thing can read a little sterile. But if you take the line outputs on the back of your aux and you run them into the FK comp and start to push that drive up, there are some sweet spots in there that not only bring up the level that you are getting from your aux to your DAW, but also starts to build up some really rich harmonic overtones. So let's dial up 2 different guitar tones and see how that kind of harmonic content can really accentuate both sounds. We'll start with more of an ambient clean sound, neck position on the guitar, analog man king of tone, Strymon dig, Strymon L cap into the Benson, and then we'll start it all over again with the 1981 Inventions DRV, which is more of a rat distortion, and we'll give both of those sounds a listen, both dry going through the FK comps and then making full wet use of the drive circuit on these modules. Next up, I want to highlight what I would consider to be the daily driver use case for the FK comps from my studio, which is I have them in the rack as a stereo pair, and I put them in that link mode bottom position, and then we just run drum libraries through them. So I use a lot of analog gear for my guitars and my basses and everything, but 99% of the time, the drums in my songs are fully in the box. I use Kontakt 7 or 8 and Mixwave's Aaron Gillespie drum kit to write and mix all of my drums. I play them in on a MIDI controller and just kind of try to fight to make them sound as in the room with the rest of the instruments as possible. And over time, I found that the number of plugins I was using on my drum bus was just growing, trying to make all of these nuanced changes to just create this sense of what if these weren't digital? And these days I just run the drum library into the FK comps, I dime the input, and then I use the mix control to decide how much of that bombastic overdriven drum saturation I want kind of running in parallel with the unaffected sound. And it's kind of solved my drum libraries for me, which is really great. So here are all the stems from a recent project, mixed audio for guitars, synths, and bass, and then the kind of like untreated guitars. We have Kontakt 7 right here with Mixwave Aaron Gillespie inside. Here is what our drums sound like solo. And here's what they sound like in context. Let's bring those down a bit, and then let's go ahead and give a listen to our FK comps. So to demonstrate what we're doing to kind of create a ton of energy and bombast with our drums, as well as getting that kind of like analog feel to make them sit into the mix a little bit better, let's start off by keeping our mix at minimum and our input at 0, and then we'll start to kind of drive that input harder as we bring up the mix. And once more, let's go ahead and disable and re-enable that FK so you can hear the difference in context. Let's say you don't want to destroy all of your drums like that. Well, last week I brought in a real drummer for a project and recorded him playing a full kit, fully mic'd up for a project on this channel. I'll link it down below if you want to hear the song that this was a part of. But in the recording process, I had enough mics to mic every single individual instrument on the kit. One kick, one snare, one hat, one on each tom, stereo overheads, but no room mics, no outer kick, no under snare. So any room sound that I needed to be able to pull out of this drum set was either going to be a reverb plugin or it was going to arrive by making those drum overheads as big as humanly possible. And so for these sound samples, we're going to go ahead and solo up that kit from that song, and we are going to run just our overheads through the FKs, because now that you've heard what they do to the drum libraries, you can hear how it just kind of takes everything and blows it up. Every transient gets really exaggerated. The boominess of your kick expands into the room, and those cymbals will just kind of like rise to the surface so presently. So let's go ahead and apply these to just overheads and see how big we can make a set of overheads recorded with ribbon mic sound alongside an entire kit. So let's start by giving a listen to the kind of drum context, and we'll pull down to just the overheads and see what processing we are doing on them before we apply the FK comps. So this is what our kind of drum mix across the board sounds like. And here's just our overheads. And all that's being done there is we have this SSL-G channel from Plugin Alliance. It's on every single channel in the project, and it's only being used for that TMT kind of random channel assignment, because this plugin models the individual channel strips of an entire console, and it's just this tiny bit of separation I like. All the actual changes are being done in the API Vision plugin right here. Here's what it sounds like without it. So we've got kind of a high and wide set of overheads. We're trying to capture the whole image of the kit versus just the overheads themselves. Kind of that room feel, kind of vintage vibe for a kit. And then the EQ on the Vision is just giving us more low end, carving out some boxiness in the middle, and that cymbal presence with a healthy amount of level boost from the line amplifier in the plugin, just to kind of bolster up those ribbon mics that we recorded the overheads with. Let's go ahead and send them on through to the FK comps. So as you can hear right there, we are not getting a ton of change in the timbre and the kind of volume and compression and everything. We're just getting that slight transistor boost from the comps. But as we start to drive these up and you see those You Did It lights start to light up, you'll really hear as we kind of start to explode out those overheads and really give a sense of the energy of the room. And then we will kind of bring the level down and introduce it as a parallel mix using those mix controls into the rest of the kit. So let's give it a listen. And without the overheads. And last but not least, a really fun discovery I made when experimenting with the FK comps using just one of them. And that is an incredibly low mix FK comp on bass. So we're going to pull up my bass, put it back in compressor mode, that kind of one position on the toggle. And we're going to give a listen to my bass dry through the FK comp running through my pedal board. And then we're going to bring up that mix just a hair, because if you really drive this thing too hard, you're going to get a lot of distortion and saturation on, like I said, your legato melodic instruments. But if you bring it up just a hair, I find that it does this exciting thing that I really love and I'm probably going to implement on almost all of my bass parts moving forward. So almost nothing in this world is truly unique. We are all iterating, and almost everything is built on the shoulders of what came before it. And so goes with the FK comps. These are not something that exists only here and nowhere in the box, but I have not found anything in the box that does quite what this is doing. I would say that if you are looking for a plug-in version of this kind of thing, your best bets are probably going to be found in things like the Sound Toys Decapitator or the Empirical Labs Distressor plugins, but I find that both of those are a little bit more gentlemanly than the FK comp is. This circuit has a raucousness and a wide open, airy explosiveness to it that I don't get from driving hard limiters and saturators in the box hard like I do with something like this. But if you're looking for those sounds, those might be a good place to start and find out if this is something worth pursuing for you. But if you're somebody who uses a lot of drum libraries or who records a lot of analog drums, I can't recommend these highly enough. These have been foundational in changing my mix approach to my in-the-box drums, and they are a blast to put on mic sources for live drums as well. And I've also found that Drive Circuit offers a really unique new color palette for choosing how to get guitars into my DAW, and I just find that to be great extra credit for these circuits. So I'm going to link to Garbage Ideas stuff down below. I would love it if you would check them out, give them a follow on social media, keep an eye out for what they've got coming because they are a brand new company and they are worth knowing about.